All right, all right. Thank everybody for coming in and joining us for another Rebuild Honestly campaign. We have a great guy with us, Davin Gordon from AltCap, and we're basically here to Kiana, say what's up.
What up? What's up, BXKC?
We're basically here to really talk about what it takes for small businesses. I know nobody can prepare for a pandemic like this, but what it takes for small businesses to make sure that they are ready. As my uncle used to say, my grandfather used to say, stay ready so you ain't got to get ready. And so what we brought Davin to the table for is to one give us some insight on the relief or the resources that have been available for Kansas City in particular small businesses. What AllCap has been able to do. I've seen that you guys had a couple of different news articles come out for some small businesses being able to see some funds from you guys, which is a great thing. And basically, what is it that you guys' mindset is in comparison to the CARES Act? Because I think you mentioned that you guys are not necessarily doing anything with those resources. So, I want to give you some time to go ahead and introduce yourself, and we can get right into it.
Awesome. Hey, I appreciate it. Craig and Kiana, thanks for inviting me tonight. As you mentioned, my name is Davin Gordon, Business Development Officer at AltCap. For those that aren't familiar, AltCap is a community development financial institution, a CDFI, which is a federal designation through the U.S. Treasury Department. And essentially, our industry, very similarly to the CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, were put in place and created after a lot of the inequities we saw post the civil rights movement and the lack of flow of capital from mainstream financial institutions into communities of color. A lot of those efforts were very intentional. And so these efforts, these sort of designations and regulations were put in place to ensure that capital is flowing into our communities of color. And so as things have grown and evolved, I would say CDFIs, continue to grow and probably look a little bit more like your traditional sort of financial institutions. But, we are very mission driven. And we definitely, we have certain things in place that ensure that we're getting capital into what you would call low to moderate income communities based on census tract data. So for those that haven't yet, please fill out your census tract data, your census tract stuff, because that is so important. It decides where money is flown, put into, what sort of resources come to your community, and don't take that lightly, because it could be the difference between your neighborhood or your community or your city getting funding for a lot of the challenges that we see within our communities. So all cap specifically, we're a loan fund that focuses on small businesses. So we started off doing a tax credit program called the New Market Tax Credits, which essentially is it's patient capital for redevelopment projects in low-income communities with an emphasis around job creation. Some of the projects that I like to highlight that we've been able to fund over the years in Kansas City, one would be the Linwood YMCA, Westport Plexpod Commons. And so it's pretty cool to say that we did a tax credit deal on the co-working space Westport, and then a few years later turn around and do a micro loan to a small business. It was a character-based loan, but we were able to do a micro loan inside of that facility. So
That's
that was
awesome.
pretty cool. But yeah, so like I said, we do small business financing and micro lending. That's our specialty. We're trying to do the best we can and being equitable and always keeping in mind, our women and minority owned businesses. We do have some very intentional and focused loan products that are specifically for those sort of demographics. So I would say not just us, but I think our city and our country still has a long ways to go until we get to that point where I know Kiana is always on it about the equity piece. It's going to take some really hard and honest conversations, some really uncomfortable conversations for us to really get to a point where we feel like, where we should be at this point. But um, Yeah, I'm gonna take a breath for a little bit. I don't know if you guys want to jump in, but I'm happy to go into the relief efforts and all of that.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess with as you could as we see with the federal relief that's been brought out, things go fast. Applications are really pouring into a lot of these, and I'm pretty sure it happened to you guys as well, especially with you being so well known across the city. What has been your perspective on the preparedness in trying to the preparedness of those businesses that you would try to look at to create that equity piece and to
Yeah.
make sure that disbursement is going out evenly across the city.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I specifically work with a lot of micro enterprises, which those are going to be restaurants, bars, just, a lot of the main street sort of businesses that you might be familiar with. And a lot of times, regardless of, ethnicity or anything like that, they don't have the sort of systems in place. So that could be a board of trustees or someone, just an advisor or a mentor, or they don't have an accountant or a legal counsel that's in place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to situations like this where you gotta react super quickly, you don't have that safety net or that that support group that you can fall back on and say, hey, look, I need your help to get my financials together so I can apply for this loan. They're having to do it all themselves, or they haven't kept up with their financials because with a lot of these small business relief efforts, having your financials up to date is so critical
Yeah.
at the end of the day, because we're trying to make a split decision based on a very few minimal sort of data points, one being your financials. If you don't have those prepared or they're backlogged 6 months to a year, it's going to take you some time to get those to a point where they're accurate and up to date. And by the time you do that, the funding might be gone. And I think that's what happened with the first round of the PPP and the EIDL, the SBA loan products, was a lot of our more micro enterprises, small businesses, just weren't prepared for all of that. And so I think you saw them trying to take their time and get ready. And by the time they were ready, or by the time they heard about it,
Mm-hmm.
the funding was already gone. And so I know you didn't ask this, but I think, that's why when we say it's important to get out and vote, it's so important to vote for your constituents that are going to
Mm,
represent you on a federal level.
mm,
If you don't have people in your from your region or from your district representing you and who you are at the federal or state or local level, your voice isn't going to be heard. And so when they were creating these PPP and EIDL programs, they weren't thinking about you,
Right.
unfortunately, right? So
yeah.
that's why it's so important to encourage people to get out and vote, and to vote for people that share similar perspectives or lived experiences as them. So I know that wasn't directly connected
No,
to it,
no,
but
no.
I wanted to tie that in because it's so important.
Yeah, it's. I think that we're finding that more and more apparent, especially with the rush to reopen. With the it almost seems like that once there was noticeable that it was a peak in the urban community, that it's like, oh, it's okay, we're cool, we can reopen and get things back going. And talking to Mayor Lucas, he was even saying, he wasn't able to get a lot of federal funding because of population, and I
In the
think
census.
in the census not being taken care of. And I finally feel like that, he is a person who is of his people, all people across Kansas City. And so now it's about us being prepared or not, and getting in those data points so that we can be able to get the resources and the time to be able to grasp those resources. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm glad you looped that in because I feel like that's a very important piece.
Hmm. What would you say, Davin, to people? I'm playing devil's advocate, so I got my financials together. They could they backlog in 5 years, 10 years. You know what I'm saying? Ain't never really had to take advantage of a loan, maybe once, but I'm still denied, even in light of COVID-19. So, what is the difference between then versus now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if I was prepared, because I've heard certain places still was able to provide all of that documentation and thoroughly went through the process and all of the steps, and they even knew what they were doing and had accountants and CPA people look at it, and still was denied. So what if that's someone's experience, or if somebody knows somebody who's been through that? What do you say about that process, and what is your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing, it's not just with this, but I think it's anything in life, is your
Mm-hmm.
relationships. I think it's so important to continue to grow and foster relationships, whether it be with your banker, financial institution, your financial advisor, your neighbor, like your little neighbor, your community members, everybody. It's so important to continue to build those relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that for myself, I personally always make sure that I'm like keeping in touch with folks. I know we text every now and then, sharing ideas and articles, but
Mm-hmm.
those little communication points could be the difference between you getting pushed through or not. And to
Yeah.
your example, that's what happened with one of the clients that I was able to work with. Was he's a well-known business in the community. He's pretty stable. He banks with one of the four large banks, and because he didn't have a loan with that large bank, he wasn't a priority for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had to go and search on a chat group, like where he could apply for an SBA loan. Ended up applying in Florida with
Wow.
some financial institution I've never heard of, but
That's
but
not the
had
point.
he, yeah, but that's not the point. But had he had the relationship in place, which is never easy because you never know when things are like this are going to happen. But why it's so important to constantly be thinking about how can I get out and network,
Mm-hmm.
how can I be intentional about who I'm talking to, who I
Mm-hmm.
engage with, and it doesn't have to be all the time or frequently. It's just every now and then, just check in on people.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah.
No,
So
that's a great one. And before I let Craig answer, because I have a follow up, what do you say, or what has this exposed? So now we are, in this crisis. A lot of people are seeing a lot of things. If
yeah,
you had about a top, three or five, what should people now? Okay, now we know it's
yeah,
exposed.
yeah,
What, as a business owner, because in light of if it's a pandemic or not, these are things that I just need to just make sure I have in place. What are those things? And in terms of just finances, or like you said, building relationships with your banker, like maybe that is a monthly lunch, or communicating, or hey, is there anything that I need to be doing? So instead of me finding out that I talked to AltCap that there's a gap in my finances or my books, that should have probably been maybe a CPA accountant sit down or whatever. Not now when we're in the midst of COVID-19 and I got a lot of
yeah,
things I got to worry about.
yeah. So I would say that most important thing is stop siloing yourself. And I think we all have been in a position where we might silo ourselves, but we're
Mm-hmm.
all in this together at the end of the day. Continue to understand who your clients are, who your customers are, and what their needs are, because I think that's one big thing that I've been advising a lot of the small businesses that I'm talking to is lean on your customers. Those customers that come in every week, or that you can depend on, and rely on them. Those are the folks that are going to get you through these tough times. Also, definitely on the financial side, don't take that lightly. I know it's sometimes it can be expensive to hire an accountant, but it
Mm-hmm.
might be more expensive 2020,
Right.
thinking about how much you missed out on not having your books together, right? So
Yeah.
of course you're never going to know when these are going to happen, but put in the right procedures and policies and systems within your own company. I think will always help you alleviate when there's a crisis, or something comes up, an emergency comes up. You've got something in place for that. And it's not easy planning for these things.
Mm-hmm.
If it was, we would all be doing it, right? We'd all have it figured out. But there's some amazing resources that are available. There's people that are wanting to help and to help you figure this out. Sometimes it's either swallowing your pride, or not being afraid, being vulnerable, and not being afraid to ask for help,
Mm-hmm.
even if you don't know what that help looks like. There's
Right.
plenty of mentors and small business advisors, even if you don't know them or trust them. If you just say, hey, look, I'm curious what your thoughts are, I'm guaranteeing there's somebody out there that'll give you some free ideas, some free thoughts about ways you can improve your business model, or just something to even think about, whether you agree with it or not.
Agreed. So, I feel like that's a lot of what BXKC is trying to do is for small businesses or for our members. We want to connect them with valuable resources and just make strong connections. Like you said, I'm a true believer in relationships, and this if not now, this is an opportunity for you to grow those relationships so that we all can be uplifted out of this. With AltCap not being basically a lender of the CARES Act resources that have been coming has come out. What and I'm pretty sure with those funds that you guys do have, things have kind of slowed down a little bit for you to where you've been able to accept applications. What are you guys' future plans, or do you know of any other resources that might be available out there?
Yeah, so let me just touch a little bit on kind of what we did. So it was about a month ago. We started talking as a team. We wanted to launch a small business relief fund. Not that we forecasted what the Fed was going to do, but we knew that those federal dollars weren't going to reach the communities that we serve. And so we wanted to make sure that, we created a very intentional fund, for Kansas City businesses, small businesses, specifically those non-essential businesses within the Kansas City metro. And it's been a very fluid process as the federal programs have been, but as time has gone on, we've realized, we need to be as intentional as possible. And so internally, we've got some layers of priority on how we're looking at opportunities based on, is it a women or minority owned business? Is it within, some of the communities that we typically serve? Is the ask under a certain amount? Because uh, we set out to raise a $5 million fund. We're not quite to that $5 million mark yet. We're getting close, but we knew if we did a bunch of $100,000 loans, that money wasn't going to go very far. So we wanted to make sure that these dollars were getting to those small businesses that maybe only need 15, 20, 30,000 just to get by these next few months. And so that's what we've been doing. And I'm pretty proud to say we've approved over $1 million worth of loans so far, with
Awesome.
the average loan size being about 25,000. So that's been amazing. And we have an amazing team. Everybody's been putting in some work, putting in that overtime.
I bet.
It's been an interesting process, and I mean, I'm sure we're not the only ones, but we're learning a lot about ourselves and our organization. And I think we're going to come back from this even stronger as an organization. And I hope that's how businesses are looking at it, right? This is a good time for them to start, maybe looking at some of the weak points of their business. Is that social media? Because if I had a social media presence, then I could be selling e-commerce, or I could be driving business through that. Maybe this is something I need to focus on in the future. And so back to your question, what we're doing is we're starting to plan one around what is it going to look like after all of this. We understand that the reality is there are businesses that are probably going to go out of business. As sad as it is to say, that's just the reality. And so we got to start planning for what that's going to look like, what the bounce back is going to look like. And so, we're looking at, maybe creating some new products around a restart or
Wow.
rebuilding sort of loan product. We're also looking at, so in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, we call this technical assistance, which
Hmm.
essentially just means, business development support for small business owners. So that could be mentoring, it could be training, it could be coaching, all sorts of different resources out there. So we're trying to think, okay, how can we be intentional about providing technical assistance to our borrowers so that we ensure that they are successful and maintain that sort of open communication line. Because if things aren't going as they planned, we can always adjust. And that's the important thing, I think, for everyone, even if you're not a small business owner, is be in contact with any of your lenders or debitors, credit card providers. I think the important thing is don't shy away from those conversations. They may be uncomfortable, they may not be what you're used to talking about. But I think for the most part, most people want to do right by everybody, and so you just got to stay vulnerable and open to having that communication, and sharing that with people, and that's the only way people are able to help is by being honest. And so, yeah, I mean, we're just looking at, we need to implement more technology. I think if anything, back to Kiana's original question, I think technology is a piece that not enough people are leveraging for their advantage, and there might
Mhm.
be reasons for that. And I know there's a huge digital divide within certain communities. I know some people have, identity theft and like privacy issues,
Mm-hmm.
but I think technology is the equalizer in a lot of this. So yeah, I'm interested to see how things are going to shake out. And we're just thinking about how can we in the future, um, encourage businesses to be more resilient, and what is that going to look like? And I think that's going to be more cooperative models, more collectives. So not just me being the sole owner, but all of my employees having some ownership in the business,
Right.
right? Sharing that equity, sharing the wealth, so that in the crisis mode, we all have some safety nets we can fall back on. So just different things like that.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and I hope that people understand that. I mean, I feel like some people, maybe this was a conversation you've already had with certain businesses that, maybe your design is not maybe set up for, or McDonald's is not the same as Burger King, but Burger King needs everybody to have more ownership in the company, but it just took COVID-19 to expose that. So hopefully, we do what we need to do as a community, and specifically speaking black and brown folks, because we can, you want people to advocate, you want to employ, to, give the green light and say, hey, Kiana, we got this funding for you, but if we don't do what we need to do, the simple steps, then we're not going to move. But hopefully, as you mentioned, this has shed some light on some very important matters, and hopefully we can grow from it from here. So
Do you so once everything is said and done and everybody's back into this rebuilding situation, do you think that the view of what lenders, I'm just talking about overall, not just all cap, but the view of how lenders look for businesses that they want to lend money to is going to change? Like, say that, is it going to be more towards something that they think is going to be an essential business that can last through a pandemic, or could your average clothes designer open up their boutique and still walk in and get that same type of loan as somebody who possibly even made a pivot to do something that was essential during this time?
Yeah, so I think, the reason why we study history is to always kind of look back and see what folks have done historically in these sort of situations. And so I'm assuming if you look back at the 2008 crisis, it really tightened up the banking industry as a whole. And so it became even more challenging for folks to access, the right financing that they need for their business. And so I anticipate, at least for the immediate future, it's probably going to be really hard to get financing from a bank, and that's solely because they are regulated. They always have to put their debitors' interests first. So if you're a debitor at a certain bank, they're always looking out for you and their stakeholders, whoever their stakeholders are. And so with that being said, I think from a lending perspective, solely from a lending perspective, I think they're going to tighten up quite a bit. And so it's going to be even more important for alternative lenders like AltCap or some of the safe online lenders. You got to be very careful because this is a time where those sort of predatory lenders will want to take advantage. And so whether you're a business owner or a consumer, be very careful about that because these predatory lenders are doing a great job of disguising a lot of their hidden fees and their intentions because they know people are in a position of need and in a position of crisis. So, but I really think it's going to come down to that. I also think we're gonna have to get creative around how we finance small businesses and
Hmm.
other entities. Like I said, I think it's gonna be more collective sort of efforts. And I think for long term success, that's what we got to look at. We got to look at more sustainable models because, the SBA funding, our relief fund, a lot of these things are just band aid solutions,
Mm.
right? And so it's easy to just say these are going to solve all of our problems, but they're not. And so I think it's shined a light on a lot of these, well, obviously the inequities, but the lack of stability as well. So
Yeah.
What are some of those red flags that, as you mentioned, in those online lenders, or what could people be looking out
yeah,
for?
yeah. So, because I do this all the time, like, oh, like this person's offering me a loan. Should I take it? And I'll go and look. And at first, it's like, oh, really low interest, all of that looks great. And then you start digging a little bit deeper and, look for any sort of like annual fees. Look for is it a variable sort of interest rate? Can it change? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
where they get you. Like at first it's 3, 4, 5%, and then it could jump up to 30, 40 plus. Also, if you miss a payment, what is the interest rate change to? That's one thing that a lot of those online lenders like to look for. But if they are accredited or safe, they're going to have some sort of they're going to be federally insured sometimes, so they'll have that backing, that stamp. um, Look for the Better Business Bureau. Like sometimes those are great ways to quickly assess if it's a trustworthy platform. But just do your homework. If anything, I always like to Google search and read the comments because people would you'll
Yeah.
find real quick like, all
Yeah.
right, this looked good, but it was a trick.
Good.
So
So, what do you say? So, like, I've seen many posts of small business owners who actually do receive the relief funds, but they're in the corner with, I can barely open. Say if I'm a restaurant and I can barely open up, and my employees are making more money on unemployment, but I just got this fund, so I need to be open. I need to have. They're basically in a restart phase. What do you say to those business owners of the proper way to handle of fighting so hard to receive something, you finally get it, but you still realize you're pretty much at ground zero again.
yeah, that's a tough question to answer. My initial reaction is always put health and safety first.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on the type of business that it is, just make sure that you're putting the right procedures in place to ensure the safety of not only your customers but your employees. That's first and foremost for me personally. I just want to throw this out here. My boy Dell Gines always does this, like, these are my own views, not the views of my
Right.
organization.
Right. Go ahead.
But just to make that clear. But secondly, it's all about projections, man. And that's the hard part right now is you can't project how the market is going to react. And that's why I said it's so important to rely on your existing customers and clients. A lot of folks have these, like, reward systems where they're tracking phone numbers. You know, go back and like maybe shoot all those people a text message that says, "Hey,
Okay.
you got a 5% or 10% off the next purchase," or I don't know. That's what I would suggest.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I'm not an expert by any means. I don't run my own small business. However, I have given a lot of great advice. But
You give
but
a lot of great advice and you give a lot of
yeah,
money. So I would think if you don't need to be an owner, people should probably listen just to a little
yeah,
bit of what you got to say.
yeah, yeah. So I don't have an answer for you directly, but indirectly, it's just figuring out, okay, what are my best hours of operation?
Hmm.
How many customers do I need in order to just even break even,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
Right.
And what does break even mean? Just all of the income and cash flow that's coming in is covering your operating expenses
Yeah.
at the bare minimum. And if not, it might be advantageous to reconsider taking that money and giving it back.
Hmm.
Oh, one other really important thing: if you did get PPP funding, because some folks do have trusted advisors that are telling them this, open up a separate account for this money.
Hmm.
And I'm telling you that because it's important to track it accurately so that you get reimbursed or forgiven for the right money and all of that. So if you do get into that SBA funding, make sure you create a separate bank account for that funding.
Hmm.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So we just had a comment in there in our group, and it said, Mayor Lucas spoke about community-driven economic development. It's happening now due to COVID-19, but groups like AltCap need more support to provide proof of these models. What does that support look like, and how is it? Can our listeners or people that we spread the word to know more about how to help you guys out?
that's my boy Mike. He's throwing me a softball right now because he knows we've been working on this. I appreciate it, Mike. So it goes back to my comments around these collective models. And in order for us to be able to at least cope with a crisis like this in the future, we've got
Hmm.
to start building more wealth in our communities. We have to, becoming more sustainable, becoming more independent. And so one way, not always, there's plenty of ways to do this, is you've got to find these sort of equity models where, folks have an opportunity to start building, even if it's a small savings account, $400 or $500, that could be the difference of you feeding your family or keeping your lights on for a month or two while you're unemployed,
Mm.
or your business is not up and going. So um, what can we do to support more of these? I think, Mike, this isn't easy, but uh, the problem with our market too is we like to play it safe. We like to wait until people on the coast do things. And so I think it's
Very true.
something we've got to look inside internally at ourselves as a city, and um as members of the community, of
And when
like,
we go vote in November,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
There's a lot of things, but we have to, I don't know. I don't There's no easy way for me to answer that question, unfortunately. I have a lot of thoughts around it, and I'll come back to it. Let me gather my thoughts about how to answer that, right?
All right, no problem. I mean, I think that it it sometimes it takes an event like this for us to truly understand what we have within, and for us to truly, as the new term now is to pivot our ideas or what our business models may be. But it also takes a collective, right? I think as BXKC, the main thing what I've seen, and I hate to say that this was an opportunity for us, but it's presented itself in a way to where we can provide this platform to really be the lines between the dots, right? Everybody has this idea of what it takes to be able to push our culture forward, but I don't think there's not one voice or one platform that can really move everybody succinctly.
Hmm.
When you talk about collectives, I see, two, three different businesses that might seem like they'll be competitors, but they all have their own strengths. And if they all came together and created one, entity that can spread funds out to all three of them, and to where they're all rising at the same, that is a new idea or a new wave, almost a co-op way, to be able to, one, receive funds, and two, to establish the overall goal. There's different ways that this city has been growing. There's a lot of pros and cons to it, and I think that's what made equity as big as what it is right now. And so
Hmm.
you have to. I'm not a small business owner either. I helped a lot of businesses in certain points of their growth. You have to really try to figure out what that sustainability looks like, and how can that sustainability survive even after you're gone.
Hmm.
How is this something that is going to help my community, that's going to help the industry that I'm trying to, or bring innovation to the industry that I'm trying to enter in. I think, and it's a lot of outside the box things. I mean, we had a talk with the porterhouse, and there was a guy in there who was this like VR guru, and he's got
Hurts and Davin.
Herson,
Hurston,
yeah,
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 Hurts.
yeah.
I figured
And
it was
it's
him.
and it's like, man, like I just been like on his content on just the
Yeah,
internet, period.
he's
And I
always the
have,
smartest person in the room,
I'm
always.
like, dude, like you're taking this to a whole nother level. But it's like, I really feel like it's those ideas that people can't really wrap their minds around yet that are going to be the ones that get us out of this situation, or they're going to
Hmm.
be the ones that are going to help us, survive or move to the next level. And that's where I like feel like all this is,
Yeah.
um, I, yeah, it's just a lot.
So I want to kind of go back to Michael's question. It's giving me some time to think, and we were talking earlier. He's my coworker,
Okay,
and one of my best friends. So,
awesome.
I think the thing is we've got to encourage, city leaders, community leaders, everyone to acknowledge, all the different work that's being done around the community, right? To empower the disadvantaged or left behind or marginalized, and figure out how you can partner and collaborate with them. And I know, Kiana, you
Mm-hmm.
may not feel the same way about this, but I think acknowledging that good work does more good for the community instead of vilifying or not trying to support some of these organizations
Mm-hmm.
for the overall good of the community and for everything. I think at the end of the day, everyone's trying to do things for the right reasons, and I think it's better served for everybody to kind of come together and say, "All right, let's figure this out together,"
Mm-hmm.
versus like, "Oh, I don't trust them. I don't see eye to eye with them, or I don't believe in the work that they're doing." Although it's serving your community and there's direct, benefits or things you can point to that people have done. So, without
Mm-hmm.
getting into any specific details, I think it's so important that we continue to just hold folks accountable and say, hey, look, there are people doing good work. It could be better. There could be more that they're doing, but let's figure this out with them instead
Mm-hmm.
of just saying you're not doing what you said you're supposed to be doing. That's
Mm-hmm.
easy, right? That's the easy thing to do. I can do that all day. But I think the more productive thing is to be solution driven. Is to say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, look, I understand, you haven't done or have been, held up to what we thought you were doing. Let's figure this out. What's going wrong? How can you improve? And I think a lot of folks are open to that conversation. But
Mm-hmm.
again, it goes back to, um, a lot of the traditionalists or traditional things that have happened in our city. It makes it tough to have those conversations sometimes. So you got to put egos aside, or old vendettas or whatever the case may be, and say, hey, look, I want to work with you to figure this out for the greater good of our city and for our community and for our people.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's just that dialogue in itself, I think is still way more productive than just calling people out or not wanting to work with certain people or certain groups. So just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to put that out there. I think that's the only way we're going to actually move the needle
Hmm.
for our city. And I know people may not agree with that, but um, it takes a
No,
village.
no,
So
I agree. I know you mentioned I would disagree with some. I agree with that. I think at this point it's a heart to heart issue. Hearts are being exposed because at this point everybody's going to be on the same playing field because COVID-19 has brought in some capacity in every sector of our community downward, and that's just the
yeah,
nature of the beast. And
yeah,
so even if you were financially great or not, it's done. It's both due justice for both parties.
exactly.
And so at this point what would make Mayor Quinton's job easier is some type of collective effort from all city leaders, pastorals, loan entities, AltCap, banking, community engagement, programs that are providing things for children. All of these different nuances need to find the common ground in what we say. We want to help people. Okay, we want to help people. That's what we're here for today. And I think Craig and I we've heard that discussion once or twice now that needs to happen from every leader. That would be interesting to see how we can find a room in a round table that would be able to fit how many people we have in Kansas City, but I think it's well overdue. And quite honestly, I think that's very powerful. When you can get 100 or 150 people in one room and say, after this, you know what, we're going to stick it through. We're not here for egos. We're not here to make a point. We're here to get our city back up and running.
Yeah,
And we need everybody here who says they have the best interest in Kansas City to do so. And so hopefully As you mentioned, Craig, BXKC, that's what we're designed to do. We have a hand in that, and Davin, you're our guy. We appreciate you bringing the millions to the city. I mean,
Yeah,
it's been great, and you're doing. I know you don't like to really talk or spread a light on it, but you're doing just great things for Kansas City, and I want you to know that people see it, and I don't think without your leadership, a lot of this would have happened. People wouldn't have access to money that they probably didn't have, even if it is just such a band-aid for right now. But still, like brother, you've been doing it, and
I really appreciate it.
we're blessed to have you here in Kansas City. So
I really appreciate that. I really do.
Definitely.
I don't like
Davin.
to talk about it, but I really appreciate that.
yeah, I know you don't, but we have to give people their what Craig like to say. We have to give people their coins while they're here,
Yeah.
not when they're gone. So
Yeah.
if you didn't hear it from anyone else, you heard it here. Because I don't think a lot of businesses, even if it was a small whatever, okay, you still got something to spend, to provide, and to get access to your business. And that was because of AltCap. And most importantly, you spoke on it. Your relationships, the relationships that you have in the community is the way that AltCap has been able to be so successful in Kansas City. I see AltCap and I think of you, so that says a lot. I don't know, and that's no offense to your boss or anything. It's just we know people, not brands, and we know
Yeah.
brands that are attached to people. So that speaks a lot. So
Definitely. I truly feel that all cap will have, even if you're not accepting applications now, you guys definitely have the resources and the visibility to really help us rebuild. And
mhm,
BSKC is here to kind of connect you guys with in any way we can to the small businesses that are joined in with us. I appreciate it that those small loans, because I feel like, as culturally, we're made to make something out of nothing, and as a small business owner, when I was trying to do it, I didn't want $100,000. I didn't want $1 million. I just need that 20,000 to get me where I needed to be, because I knew I can grow the rest. And so it's
yeah,
important that there are community minded um, entities out there that can give that support. And whatever we could do to, I did go on the website. If anybody's listening, if y'all got the resources, please donate so they can get to that 5 million, because I know there's a lot of small businesses out there that are still waiting in the rafters for you guys' type of help. But you got any closing remarks or anything that you want to say
Yeah.
lastly to our?
Well, I did. I really appreciate what you guys both just said, a lot, and I think, All Cap is prepared to be stronger after all of this. We've learned so much, and I think we're prepared, to take the next step as an organization, whatever that
mhm,
looks like. And to Kiana's point, it is about the people. Whether
mhm,
you're a business owner or you work for a large corporation and you're a manager or a boss or whatever, it's always about the people. People are always
mhm,
come first, and don't forget that.
mhm,
Um, a few things, just to throw in a shameless plug. As you mentioned, we are accepting donations for the fund, but we also have a sister organization, Community Capital Fund, which is managed by Michael Carmona and Megan. And so they have a few for-profit businesses that they are corporate sponsors for. And so, sorry, it's not corporate sponsors. Why am I'm saying the wrong fiscal sponsors, excuse me, my bad about that. Fiscal sponsors for, so that are doing amazing work in the community. So if you're looking to donate, or finding a way to contribute, if you can, please look into that. If not, just support your favorite local businesses. Whether it's buying, a gallon juice from Ruby Jean, or if it's buying a mask from my boy Jordan. I see he's on,
Yeah.
he's tapped in. Whatever it is, reach out to those businesses that you like to patronize without the crisis going on, and
mhm.
buy gift cards, or just figure out how you can support them at these during these times. And lastly, just thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity. I know I've told Kiana, I'm just really thankful that I'm in a position to help my community and help my city out. Not everybody's in that sort of position, so just really thankful for that. But wouldn't be able to do without the great team. So
Well, we definitely appreciate you coming on with us. We want to remind everybody that our membership is open. If you go to BSKC bsksd.org/join us. You can become a member, and you can get more in depth into these conversations that we have with people like Davin. We'll soon be opening up a couple of Zoom forums specifically for each industry, just to kind of collectively talk about how to safely reopen, what it looks like for us to support each other. So it's a prime time right now to become a part of the BSKC family. That's what I like to call it. You're not a member; you're a family to us. So go to
Yeah.
bskc.org /join us. Kiana, you got anything you want to say?
Nah, let's just all, like Davin said, it's about the people. And I feel like at the end of the day, that's what's going to separate a lot of things here and moving forward. A lot of businesses, those relationships and what you told people and how you supported people, how you treated people. All of those things are going to play a factor into this next phase and a person's up next level season going into 2021. So
All right, without further ado, man, we appreciate everybody tuning in with us. Check us
Haircut. You
out.
guys doing the
The con-
oh the BX or
yeah,
what?
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, and the shameless
BSKC.
plug, they don't know yet, but they're selling prepaid memberships to BX. So look
Oh
out for
yeah,
those.
yeah.
Oh
Pretty soon
yeah.
it's about to
Coming
be
in
launching.
hot.
Pretty soon, prepaid memberships.
Oh man.
All right,
Oh
y'all.
man,
Peace out.
appreciate y'all.